column accordingly in order to maintain the aircraft in exactly the same condition we require it to be in.
Straight and level flight. In order to fly the aircraft straight, we first of all select a reference point towards which we'll fly. We keep the wings level with the horizon using aileron. We keep the aircraft in balance using the rudder. If the ball were to the right, right rudder will be required. Ball to the left, left rudder will be required to bring the ball back to the center. To fly the aircraft level, we need first of all to select the level flight power, combined with the correct level flight attitude, and that's the distance between the spinner and the horizon. Now, as long as the power is set correctly, and the attitude is set correctly, and the aircraft is in trim, the aircraft will maintain level flight, which can be confirmed by reference with the altimeter.
Okay, we're now going to look at straight level flight. Let's divide this into two. First of all, level flight. To fly the aircraft level, two requirements. First, the level flight power, correctly set. Second, the level flight attitude. You can see where the horizon is cutting through the windscreen. That's the position in this aircraft for level flight. If I were to select slightly too low a nose attitude, you can see the horizon climbing in the windscreen, the nose pointing towards the ground, and we begin to lose height. If I have slightly too high a nose attitude, the converse happens, the aircraft begins to climb. So neither this attitude nor that too low a nose attitude is correct, because we know that at this power setting, that is the correct level flight attitude. Alright, let's now talk about straight flight. To fly the aircraft straight, again, two requirements. The first one, to keep the wings level. It's no use having the wings like that, we'll turn. So we've got to keep the wings level to the horizon. And the second requirement is to keep the aircraft in balance. That little black ball needs to be kept central. Now, to confirm that we're flying straight, select a reference point. And if you look ahead, I'll just lower the nose so you can see it. I've got a beautiful chimney in view. And as long as that chimney remains in my 12 o'clock position, I know that I'm flying straight. Further confirmed, of course, by looking at the directional gyro indicator to confirm that we are maintaining the heading we require. So, in a nutshell, that's flying straight and level.
Now let's look at the climb. To enter a climb, having completed the pre-climb checks, including a thoroughly good lookout, we'll apply full power, select the known climbing attitude, which in this aircraft is with the spinner just above the horizon. We'll maintain that climb attitude, assuming the speed has settled back to the speed we require of 80 knots, and we will trim. Now, during the climb, if the speed is too high, we'll select a slightly higher nose attitude, and if the speed is too low, we'll select a slightly lower nose attitude. So during the climb, speed will be controlled by the attitude that we select against the visual horizon. Now, to recover from the climb, just as we had a set procedure of entry to the climb of power, attitude, trim, the recovery back to straight and level flight is attitude, power, and trim. In other words, we'll reselect the level flight attitude, allow the airspeed to increase to the required cruising speed, reduce the power back to the cruise power known for that aircraft, and then a final trim, which should be a slight trim forward movement. So back to straight level flight.
Our aim now is to learn to climb the aircraft at 80 knots in a constant direction from one level to another. Now, the airmanship prior to the climb: look out, behind, all around the aircraft, and in particular above the aircraft. Check the engine gauges are in the green, the altimeter settings set correctly. So here we go. Power, attitude, trim. Smoothly apply full power with a squeeze of right rudder to maintain the aircraft in balance, and select the known climbing attitude for 80 knots, which in this aircraft is there, the spinner resting just beneath the horizon. Look to the airspeed indicator and you will see the speed has settled at 80 knots, our correct climbing speed. Now, to recover from the climb, the procedure is the opposite. We're going to reselect the level flight attitude, followed by selection of power, followed by trim. So here we are, climbing up to 2,000 feet. And as we approach the required altitude, I reselect the level flight attitude, hold the attitude as the speed increases, reselect the level flight power, which we knew before to be 2,000 RPM, maintain the attitude, and trim. Attitude, power, trim.
So we've looked at climbing, let's now have a look at descending the aircraft. In order to descend the aircraft, it's first of all very important that we have a thoroughly good lookout beneath the aircraft. Having done that, a set procedure follows. First of all, reduce the power, close the throttle completely, having first of all selected the carburetor heat to hot, maintain the level flight attitude as the airspeed reduces, and just before we reach the known gliding speed, which in this aircraft is 80 knots, we will reselect the known descent attitude. That's the distance between the spinner and the horizon, the descent attitude. Having selected the correct attitude, the aircraft should descend at the correct speed. We will then trim the aircraft. Now, if the speed is too low, we'll select a slightly lower nose attitude. If the speed is slightly too high, we'll select a slightly higher nose attitude. So during the descent, speed is controlled by attitude. You will notice the rate of descent settles at about 700 feet a minute. To recover from the descent, we will reselect the level flight power. As the speed increases, reselect the level flight attitude, hold the attitude back to the straight and level attitude we saw earlier, and then retrim the aircraft. Now, as far as controlling the rate of descent is concerned, we have access to the flaps and we have access to the power. Let's first of all talk about the flaps. When I lower the flaps, you will notice that to maintain the same speed, I require a lower nose attitude. There will be a bigger gap between the spinner and the horizon, better view forward. When we raise the flaps, we'll need a higher nose attitude to maintain the same speed. So the use of flaps will be particularly good, if you like, when we come to actually landing the aircraft, a better view forward. Now finally, the power. Obviously more power means a slightly higher nose attitude to maintain the same speed, less power, a slightly lower nose attitude. So the power will have a direct effect on our rate of descent, which you'll see later. Speed still controlled by attitude.
Descending. Our aim now is to glide the aircraft at 80 knots in a constant direction and to level off at a selected altitude. Carburetor air hot, lookout completed. Throttle now slowly but completely closed with a squeeze of left rudder to maintain balance. Airspeed reducing to 80 knots, note we're maintaining the attitude initially, and just before we reach 80 knots, reselect the known descent attitude to maintain 80 knots. And there we are establishing the descent with a new attitude. Note the new position of the horizon in the windscreen. Airspeed being controlled by attitude. If we're slightly too fast, we select a slightly higher nose attitude. Slightly too slow, we select a slightly lower nose attitude. So during the descent, our airspeed is being controlled by the attitude we select. We're now going to level off at 1500 feet. So, within 200 feet of the required altitude, carburetor air to cold, 100 feet to go, smoothly reapply power and reselect the known level flight attitude. And there we have it, see the new, or rather the old position of the horizon back in the windscreen. Good, so let's now look at the effects of power in the descent. Once again, I've reduced the power, airspeed reducing to 80 knots, and reselected the attitude for the 80 knot glide descent. I'm now going to increase the power to 1500 RPM. To maintain the airspeed at 80 knots, I need to select a slightly higher nose attitude. Still descending at 80 knots, but the rate of descent is reduced. I'm now increasing the power to 18 to 1900 RPM, still maintaining 80 knots.